Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Glasgow Times News Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information at CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcast and give us any constructive feedback.
This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 13th May 2022, from the Lifestyle section. BBC announces new drama Granite Harbour, filmed in Glasgow, by Rebecca Newlands. A brand new crime drama filmed in Glasgow is being released by the BBC. Granite Harbour is a 3-part series shot across Glasgow and Aberdeenshire and set in Aberdeen. It follows Lance Corporal Davis Lindo, played by Noughts and Crosses star Romario Simpson, who becomes a new recruit to Police Scotland after completing a tour with the military police. He stars alongside Murder Island star Hannah Donaldson, Holby City's Dawn Steele, Vigil star Gary Lewis, and Shetland's Fiona Bell. Louise Thornton, head of commissioning at BBC Scotland, says, "We are thrilled to have commissioned this new drama for the BBC Scotland channel and BBC One. Audiences will be treated to an intriguing and captivating story with strong characters that will play out against the dramatic cityscape of Aberdeen and the North East. We are delighted to be working with our colleagues in BBC iPlayer to bring high-quality content based in Scotland to audiences across the UK as part of our co-commissioning strategy." Granite Harbour will show on BBC Scotland, BBC iPlayer and BBC One and is made by LA Productions. Gaynor Holmes, executive producer, BBC Drama, added, "We're delighted to be working with LA Productions on this exciting new show. I can't wait to see the story brought to life in its stunning Aberdeen setting by this brilliantly talented cast and crew." Colin McEwen, LA Productions, said, "As LA Productions is based in Liverpool, we relish the opportunity of working in both Aberdeen and Glasgow, as we feel it's such a cultural match for us as a regional company." That article was by Rebecca Newlands. This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 13th May 2022, from the Opinion section. "It's time for men to stand with women like Ailey Barber in our game," by Adam Miller. Here's one for the men. When a woman tells you she's been made to feel uncomfortable by sexist behaviour, what's your reaction? If it's anything other than listening, learning and offering support, you're doing it wrong. On Sunday night, Sky Sports and BBC Sport host Ailey Barber tweeted, "Never felt so unwelcoming in the industry I work in than sitting at the Scottish Football Writers' Awards. A huge reminder that is still so much to do in making our game an equal place. #call it out, #equal game. It later emerged that Barber had been among a number of attendees at the ceremony who walked out during a routine from Speaker Bill Copeland following a series of allegedly sexist, racist and homophobic jokes. As a high-profile figure at the top of her profession, Barber's voice carries weight, and she would not have taken the decision to tweet about her experience lightly. You would think the natural response would be to take on board what she's saying. If you're a man who's part of this world, it might cause you to reflect on your own behaviour or on your failure to challenge the behaviour of those around you. While many did just that, there were some who reacted by criticising Barber, whether it be for the manner in which she highlighted the incident or even the fact that she had an issue with sexist humour in the first place. There were demands to name names and be specific about what exactly had made her uncomfortable. And then there were the numerous comments from middle-aged dullards who used the word woke as a pejorative. If a few woke types are so pissed off, so what? Pathetic, woke, humourless. You're a weak, woke piece of that kind of thing. This is a recurring theme in modern life. Any attempt to highlight injustice or unacceptable behaviour is met with, "You're free to call it out, just don't call it out in this particular way or in this particular place or at this particular time." Essentially, you're entitled to complain, but don't be so loud that anyone has to actually do anything about it. Solicitor advocate and Aberdeen season ticket holder Erin Grieve told me, "A huge number of people are desperate to downplay what seems to have been agreed were unacceptable comments. Calling upon someone to repeat inappropriate and offensive statements so that you can attempt to moderate their reaction and accuse them of being woke is entirely missing the point. Rather than finding fault with how women raise these issues, it's incumbent upon us to hear their concerns and ask awkward questions of ourselves. Are we making women uncomfortable, or at least validating those who do with our silence?" The SFWA's statement on Monday failed to ask those questions, claiming it apologises to anyone offended or upset. Such passive language takes no accountability for their part in making attendees feel uncomfortable. Only 3 of 95 staff roles for sports reporters at Scottish print titles are filled by women, and seeing their peers lap up material that further belittles them further cements the idea that this is not a welcoming environment. As Erin put it, there are sadly still many people who don't think football is for women. It's very hard to change attitudes when there's still so much resistance. Speaking on BBC Radio Scotland's Lunchtime Live, Gabriella Bennett of the Women in Journalism Scotland group said it was worth pointing out there were lots of people laughing at these jokes. Lots of people found it really funny. I spoke to Dundee United fan Laura Costello, who helps to facilitate a mental health awareness course within Scottish football. She said any man who attended the awards would have known the speaker had crossed a line. When the name names, don't be vague, etc. responses came out, that's where men should have stepped in and said the comments were out of order and insulting, because if they had, it would 100% have taken the heat off Ailey. This is not Ailey's battle to fight, it's the men within the industry who need to fight this. Any man involved in Scottish football should have been outraged at how that night developed. Why should anyone go to an awards ceremony, be faced with these awful slurs, and have to sit amongst fellow colleagues and listen to them and laugh along? Among the men who laughed at these jokes on Sunday, there will be some who wonder where they can get away with using these words. The takeaway shouldn't be, I need to be more careful who I say awful things in front of. It should be, I need to stop saying awful things. Most of us realise that laughing along with sexist jokes is unacceptable, but it's also time for us to stand with the women in our game rather than shifting awkwardly in our seats and hoping the moment passes. If they get up and leave, so do we. When women who love football and enhance the sport are made to feel uncomfortable, we risk driving them away. And then the joke's on us. That article was by Adam Miller. This article is from The National, date 13th May 2022, from the news section. Kids OR. Scots charity in Kenyan refugee camp operating room world first. By Lucinda Cameron. A Scottish charity has opened a children's operating room in a refugee camp in Kenya in what is thought to be a world first. The facility in Kakuma, Kenya, was set up by the charity Kids Operating Room, or Kids OR, which delivered and installed more than 3,000 items of equipment and surgical tools to provide safe surgery at the site. It has been in use for nearly a year and is expected to have capacity for operations on up to 1,000 children annually, providing life-saving treatments that were previously unavailable in Kakuma due to the lack of necessary surgical equipment and paediatric surgeons. Kids OR said the camp, which has a larger population than Dundee, is home to around 40,000 children. Dr. Nima Kaze, a paediatric surgeon and Kids OR advisory member, has been training a surgical team in Kenya to maximise use of the operating room while leading the procedures that have taken place so far. She said, "It's hard for most of us to imagine living in a refugee camp setting, let alone the thought of our child not being able to access this surgery that could save their life or alleviate them from terrible pain. I'm honoured to be able to play a part in these life-changing operations and the social and economic benefits the installation has brought to the area." Jibril Hussein Imidi, 10, was one of the first patients to receive surgery from the doctor and her surgical team, having suffered from debilitating and a painful hernia since birth. His condition had previously been left untreated due to the lack of specialist surgeons and facilities that were adapted to children, causing him severe stomach pain and digestion issues. Finally, his 40-minute surgery took place. His mother Aziza said, "We had so many challenges before he was operated on. We could not go a week without him falling sick. The hospital became our home. We spent less and less time at home and more time at the hospital." The operating room provided Jibril with the operation that he so desperately needed. The surgery has helped so much. He's now back at school and doing so well. Kids OR representatives joined surgical teams, key figures from the UN Refugee Agency and the International Rescue Committee at Kakuma General Hospital in the camp on Friday, along with county officials of Kenya for a ceremony to cut the ribbon and officially open the operating room. Edinburgh headquartered Kids OR was founded by husband and wife philanthropists Gareth and Nicola Wood. Mr. Wood said, "The new safe surgical facilities, equipment and trained medical staff in Kakuma have already had a substantial effect. Thousands of children can now access timely surgical care in Kakuma refugee camp, which has a bigger population than Dundee, and this is something that should be celebrated. It was rewarding for many of those involved in this milestone project to officially mark the occasion, especially after the long delays and understandable postponements of the event over the last year. This is only the start, and we will strive to continue progressing this vital requirement, not only throughout Africa but other developing countries." Kakuma was originally founded in 1992 for people fleeing war in Sudan and has a population of around 185,000 people, according to UN data. That article was by Lucinda Cameron.
Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Community Champion marks 10 years in the role. An article written by Rebecca Newlands, digital journalist. A community champion for a Glasgow Asda store is celebrating 10 years in her role. Elizabeth Arbuckle started working in the bakery at the Tory Glen supermarket and began volunteering in Asda's Get Involved programme before becoming a community champion. She's been a community champion for 10 years now, and before that spent 12 years working in a community-facing role in the city store. Elizabeth said, "I must be one of the longest-serving champions in the business with an unbroken history. To achieve all we have over this time is simply amazing, helping so many groups in so many ways. We've received top community awards and received real recognition from our MSPs and MPs over the years." She added, "It's heartwarming to see how many of the groups we are still working with, and through them we meet new organisations who need our help. I've always been a people person and I love my job. I really have made so many great friendships over the years." Elizabeth has worked with local papers, teachers, police, fire brigades, MPs, nurseries, community halls, groups, the Golden Generation and more to ensure her local community receives the support it needs. Considered the heart of Tory Glen, she won an award at the Scottish Business in the Community Awards in 2013. Her other proud work includes volunteering at the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow and assisting a project for Orchard Grove Kindergarten, which earned her a nomination for an Evening Times Streets Ahead Award in 2014. Reflecting on the community programme, Elizabeth said, "I'm so pleased and proud that the Asda Foundation has enabled me to become a fundamental part of the community. This role is not just a 9-to-5 job. I may find myself working outside of my usual hours, but I have a great friendship bond with so many people that it doesn't always feel like work." An article written by Rebecca Newlands. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Council staff worked through the night to clear up title party litter. An article written by Tom Torrance. Council employees worked through the night to clean up unacceptable amounts of litter left behind by Celtic fans during a title party in Glasgow on Saturday. Thousands of supporters took over Merchant City to celebrate the club reclaiming the Scottish Premiership trophy. After the match against Motherwell, which ended 6-0 at Celtic Park, crowds of fans headed into the city centre to party. Several roads were closed. Thousands of glass bottles, cans and plastic bags were left strewn across streets and pavements after the gathering, which lasted for around 7 hours. Videos of the mess were widely shared on social media. Glasgow City Council revealed that they'd prepared for litter being left, with teams ready to be working through the night. Yesterday, a council spokesperson said, "Our cleansing staff were prepared in advance to start the clear-up as soon as fans started to disperse from the Merchant City. Our night shift was in place from 10 p.m. onwards, and another team is back in the area this morning to make sure things are back to normal." The staff were later praised by the local authority, who went on to remind residents to take their litter home with them in a Facebook post. It read, "A shout-out to our cleansing teams who had to tackle the litter left behind in Merchant City. Please remember to bin your rubbish or take it home with you. It's not acceptable to leave it behind or damage infrastructure." Traffic lights were broken during the street party, but were back in operation at lunchtime yesterday, following repairs which were made as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, police are investigating vandalism to the door of the toll booth at Glasgow Cross, and inquiries continue. Paul Sweeney, MSP, said, "Disappointing to hear reports that Celtic fans gathered at Glasgow Cross have broken into the 1930 Mercat Cross building by Edith Burnett Hughes. I hope Greater Glasgow Police secure this historic building and that no damage has occurred beyond forcing its door." Officers arrested 6 people during the celebrations. On Saturday night, the city's top cop, Chief Superintendent Mark Sutherland, Divisional Commander for Greater Glasgow Division, said in a statement, "Police Scotland is a human rights-based organisation that puts our values of integrity, fairness, respect and a commitment to upholding human rights at the heart of everything we do." This afternoon, thousands of Celtic supporters gathered in the area of Glasgow Cross to celebrate their team's achievement. A proportionate policing plan was in place which facilitated the gathering, prioritised public safety and sought to minimise disruption to businesses and communities. While there was an unacceptable level of antisocial behaviour and littering, there were no serious incidents or disorders. There were some outbreaks of minor disorder, and our officers acted swiftly and robustly to prevent escalation and protect safety. Over the course of the evening, there were 6 arrests for offences including assault and acts of public disorder. A further 4 people were issued with fixed penalty notices. Videos showing some of the disorders emerged on social media over the weekend. These included fans jumping up and down whilst on the roof of a white van, sectarian singing and urinating in the street. Photos of a fight were also posted. The Glasgow Times previously reported that Police Scotland said a plan of action had been put in place ahead of Saturday. Thousands of people had responded to a Facebook event which was encouraging fans to bring lots of flags, banners, booze, fireworks and pyro to the party in Merchant City. The public Facebook event also asked fans to make lots of colour and noise during the Trophy Day celebrations. An article written by Tom Torrance. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. City parks given boost by people completing community sentences. An article written by Nicole Mitchell, multimedia reporter. People completing community sentences have been digging in to improve flower beds in Glasgow parks. Work has been carried out at Tollcross Park by people carrying out community payback orders under the supervision of SACRO, Safeguarding Communities Reducing Offending. The park hosts international rose trials, and those carrying out unpaid work as part of their community sentences have helped maintain other parts of the park for visitors to enjoy, while work has also taken place in Bellahouston Park. Joe Thomas, Community Justice Manager for SACRO, said, as part of their community payback orders, teams worked on flower beds at Tollcross Park alongside SACRO's educational gardeners. Work was carried out in partnership with the Friends of Tollcross Park, on projects also supported by volunteers and veterans groups in the community. In partnership with the local authority, our workers support individuals placed on a community payback order, giving them an opportunity to give something back to the community by providing a service of real benefit. A YouGov survey of more than 1,000 Scottish adults carried out on behalf of Community Justice Scotland found that more than 3/4 of people think unpaid work improves communities. It also found 63% think it's an opportunity for someone to learn new skills. Community Justice Scotland is responsible for monitoring, promoting and supporting improvements to community justice services, and they've launched a new framing guide to help the way people talk about community justice to increase public awareness and confidence in it as a sentencing option, as evidence shows community justice can help people stop breaking the law again, leading to fewer victims and safer communities. Karen McCluskey, Chief Executive of Community Justice Scotland, said, "The evidence shows how sentences in the community can prevent crime and help rehabilitation. Now, increasing numbers of the public are recognising the benefits not only to communities but also to the individuals serving sentences, where they're able to give something back." An article written by Nicole Mitchell. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Man avoids jail term after chasing woman. An article written by Lauren Brownlee, senior reporter. A man who left a woman terrified after chasing her down a street and grabbing her has been slammed by a sheriff. We previously reported that Lukas Wieczorek appeared at Glasgow Sheriff Court following the incident on October the 17th last year, but sentencing was deferred for a criminal justice social work report to be carried out. He returned to the dock this week and was ordered to carry out 243 hours of unpaid work and be under social work supervision for 18 months. Sheriff Patricia Price told him, "You're this close to going to jail. Do you understand how terrified this woman must have been? Horrendous behaviour, disgraceful." Prosecutor Ross Harris explained that the victim was getting out of her car on Cumbernauld Road in Hag Hill when Wieczorek spotted her. He said at 4:05 p.m. the accused approached her vehicle and began to shout aggressively in a language he believed to be Eastern European. He put up his middle finger shouting Islam. The woman, who was wearing a headscarf, was fearing for her safety. She felt threatened and began to walk away. He followed and the woman sped up before breaking into a run. The accused ran after her briefly, taking hold of her right arm while waving a banknote and continuously shouting. She crossed the road onto a footpath and placed the railings between herself and the accused and proceeded to call 999 for police assistance. Meanwhile, a man passing by asked the woman if she was being harassed and went on to confront Wieczorek, who then entered a newsagent's store before coming back out with a carrier bag. Two people who witnessed him chasing the woman from their window came out to assist. They took her into their home for safety. Wieczorek of Hag Hill loitered outside before returning to his own flat. Mr Harris added he was arrested and conveyed to London Road Police Office. He was provided with a Polish translation service. Wieczork's lawyer said her client expresses deep remorse. Sheriff Price said, "This is a horrific course of events. The complainer must have been terrified. This is a woman who was on her own and was chased. You appear before me as a first offender, and the social work report tells me you're suitable for a community-based disposal." The community payback order was imposed as a direct alternative to custody. An article written by Lauren Brownlee. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Martin Lewis issues apology for foul-mouthed rant over Ofgem energy cap changes. An article written by Kieran Doody, UK Trending Editor. The UK's most popular finance expert, Martin Lewis, has been forced to apologise after branding Ofgem's proposed energy price cap changes an F with 6 stars disgrace. The money-saving expert founder apologised to Ofgem employees for losing his rag after he accused the energy regulator of selling customers down the river. As Brits struggle to contend with the ongoing cost of living crisis with soaring inflation, rising energy bills and high prices at the petrol pumps, the energy regulator said it might insert 2 new reviews a year, one in January and another in July. A decision that angered the cash-saving guru to the extent that he was later forced to apologise. Speaking on Twitter, he said, "I'd like to formally apologise to the Ofgem staff for losing my rag in a background briefing just now and saying its changes are an F with 6 stars disgrace that sells consumers down the river. I should have behaved better. My ire's institutional, not individual. It was inappropriate." He added, "I lost it when getting a briefing about today's proposals, where it feels like at every turn, in these desperate times where lives are at risk, it has ignored all asks for consumers and instead kowtowed to the industry. My breaking point was when hearing how instead of listening to calls to scrap its proposed market stabilisation charge, it was making it harsher to really stop the harmful effects of competition. Staggeringly, it aims to effectively stop firms from undercutting the price cap. Please accept that this was, and this is, an emotional rant, not a considered piece. I pray that when I do further analysis, I have to apologise again, as I've got it very wrong. If not, I worry about dire consequences for consumers. We must do more to make things better for them." His rant sparked a reply from food poverty campaigner Jack Monroe, who agreed, "You speak for all of us, Martin. Their changes are an F with 6 stars disgrace that sell consumers down the river. Anger is a powerful tool, and you, more than most, have every right to wield it. You've done enough, politely enough, for long enough to have just about have had enough." Today's proposed change would mean the price cap is more reflective of current market prices, and any price falls would be delivered more quickly to consumers, said Ofgem Chief Executive Jonathan Brearley. It would also help energy suppliers better predict how much energy they need to purchase for their customers, reducing the risk of further supplier failures, which ultimately pushes up costs for consumers. The last year has shown that we need to make changes to the price cap so that suppliers are better able to manage risks in these unprecedented market conditions. After a consultation, Ofgem hopes that the changes could come into force from October, meaning the first change under the new system would be made in January. The energy price cap, currently at a record £1,971 per year for the average household, is reviewed every 6 months and changed in October and April. Ofgem considers a range of information when deciding where the price cap should be set. The price that energy suppliers pay for the gas and electricity they buy is a major part of this. Over the last year, gas prices have risen so rapidly that suppliers were often forced to sell the gas for less than they bought it due to the price cap. By changing the price cap more often, Ofgem will make it more reflective of the international gas prices, taking some of the pressure off suppliers. An article written by Kieran Doody. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Maryhill's Glasgow Tool Library plans to expand all over the city. An article written by Esther Tanai, reporter. A unique Maryhill community organisation that lets its members borrow tools is planning to expand across the city. The Glasgow Tool Library, or GTL, has been renting out equipment and tools to its members for free since 2019 from their base in Maryhill's Garscube Road. Now they hope to make moves to other areas of the city by forming partnerships. Co-founder of the organisation, Chris Strachan, said, "People sign up and they reserve our tools online, then come and pick them up at the drop-off point and leave them at the collection point. We're now looking for partners to collaborate with to launch a new service. We're launching a new hub and spoke delivery service with new drop-off and collection points. We're based in Maryhill and we got funding to deliver this new service in the east and west. This is why we're looking for anchor organisations we could collaborate with so that they could provide us with some of the services we need, and in exchange we can bring our tool library service to them." GTL is looking for other community-led groups who have available space and are established in their local area. As part of the expansion, they're also hiring a new member of staff and hope to buy a van. With these new resources, they hope to reach more people who might use their services. Mr. Strachan added, "There are lots of benefits. One is that they get very affordable and exclusive access to expensive resources. Our membership is a pay-what-you-can system, so we have a few different options, but once you're a member, all the tools are free to borrow. By joining and borrowing one tool, most people save money. Some people save hundreds of pounds over the year, but collectively last year, I think people saved between £70,000 and £100,000. So they save a lot of money. They also save a lot of space in their house by not having to store these things, and it gives the opportunities to build things in their houses and change the places that matter to them." Aside from the financial benefits, the founders of GTL also aim to challenge people to think of the environment and society. He added, "There's also the environment part of it because there is a carbon cost to each tool, so borrowing it instead of buying it helps. It's not very much per tool, but if you add it up across the city, so if more and more people use the service, it starts to have a big impact. It also gets people a connection to a community, an accessible link to the circular economy that changes people's perception of ownership and access to resources." An article written by Esther Tanai. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Ryanair warns UK holidaymakers over summer holiday price hikes and airport delays. An article written by Nicole Badley, SEO journalist. Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary has warned flight prices will be higher this summer due to soaring demand for European holidays, and said getting through airports would be challenging for passengers. Holidaymakers should brace for prices to rise by a high single-digit % over the peak season as demand for breaks on European beach resorts rebounds thanks to the lifting of pandemic travel restrictions, he told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Mr O'Leary said there's also likely to be ongoing delays at airports such as Heathrow and Manchester, blaming staff shortages. He said there are pinch points at Heathrow and Manchester where he claimed too many people have been sacked, but added he hopes to see delays ease off in time for the busy summer season. He added, "There's no doubt getting through airports this summer is going to be challenging, and we're encouraging all of our customers to show up earlier to allow more time to get through airport security, particularly in Manchester." The comments came as Ryanair reported narrowed annual underlying losses of €355 million, or £302 million, and said it hopes to return to reasonable profitability in the current financial year. Mr O'Leary said it was impractical, if not impossible, to give guidance for 2022 to 2023 due to the risk to holiday bookings from COVID and the Ukraine war. The group's loss for the year to the 31st of March was smaller than expected and narrowed from the €1.02 billion, or £867 million, losses seen the previous year, when trading was badly impacted by the pandemic. Ryanair said traffic recovered strongly as it carried 97.1 million guests, up from just 27.5 million in the year before, thanks to the lifting of the pandemic restrictions. It said it hopes to boost this further to 165 million passengers this year, ahead of the 149 million record level seen pre-COVID, but that it was still having to slash prices to secure bookings amid ongoing uncertainty in its first quarter. He signalled prices would ramp up over the next few months. He told the programme, "I think capacity generally across the summer will be down 10%, 15%. For the September quarter at the moment, based on about 50% of all bookings, we expect prices will be up high single-digit %. The group said its peak fares for this summer may rise above those seen before the pandemic struck. It cautioned over rising fuel costs due to soaring oil prices amid the Ukraine war. With a fifth of its expected fuel needs not already secured in advance, this will give rise to some unbudgeted cost increases, the group said. Mr O'Leary said despite a bounce back in passengers and bookings, this recovery, however, remains fragile. An article written by Nicole Badley. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. 3 in 10 young Scots claim free bus pass in a missed opportunity, according to Scottish Labour. An article written by Rebecca Newlands, digital journalist. Just 3 out of 10 young Scots have claimed a free bus pass in what Scottish Labour has deemed a missed opportunity from the government. Figures obtained by the party show that across Scotland, just 284,328 children and young people aged between 5 and 21 have been issued with a pass out of the 949,000 who are eligible. These numbers mean that the uptake for the scheme, which opened in January this year, is just 30%. The figures also showed that in 11 of Scotland's 32 local authority areas, fewer than a fifth of under-22s had a pass, with just 13.3% of those eligible in South Lanarkshire having one. We previously reported that abysmal low numbers have signed up to the free bus scheme for under-22s in Glasgow, with the application described as being too complicated. Scottish Labour Transport spokesman Neil Bibby branded the figures dire and a humiliation for the SNP and the Greens, who had both committed to bring in the scheme as part of a budget deal. Mr Bibby said, free bus passes for young people should have been the good news story, but these dire figures are a humiliation for the SNP and the Greens, who have spent years talking about this card but still failed miserably to deliver it. The botched scheme is a huge missed opportunity, which could have unlocked opportunities for children and young people, eased the cost of living crisis for families, and helped us tackle the climate emergency. Instead, the SNP's rampant incompetence has let a rare good news story descend into chaos, and it's young people who are paying the price. He called on the Scottish Government to streamline the application process in order to finally deliver on this years-old promise so that no more children and young people miss out. However, a spokesperson for Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth said that the scheme's launch had been affected by the country being in the grip of the Omicron variant of COVID. The spokesperson said the Labour Party and Mr Bibby appear to have forgotten that in January of this year, Scotland, like so many other nations, was in the grip of the Omicron variant. Of course, this impacted the rollout of the under-22 scheme initially. Nevertheless, since the end of January, over 6 million journeys have been made and over 300,000 cards issued under the new scheme. Ms Gilruth's spokesperson added, the Transport Minister has said that she will continue to monitor the situation and is not ruling out making further changes to the scheme if that's what's needed. Extending free bus travel to all of Scotland's children and young people under 22 is ultimately about making public transport more affordable, helping to improve access to education, leisure and work, while supporting them to travel sustainably. While Labour carp from the sidelines, the Scottish Government is supporting people through the cost of living crisis. We're determined to ensure all children and young people who benefit most from free bus travel don't miss out. An article written by Rebecca Newlands. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Transport Minister in Rail Depot visit. An article written by Esther Tarnay, reporter. The Minister for Transport visited Scotland's Railways' new purpose-built engineering depot near Bishopbriggs. Jenny Gilruth, MSP, along with Amy Callaghan, MP, went to the facility in Cadda, which is between Bishopbriggs and Lenzie on the Edinburgh to Glasgow main line. The £33 million Cadda depot came into use in December 2021 to help improve services for passengers. During her visit, Ms Gilruth unveiled a commemorative plaque to mark the official opening of the depot. The guests also had the opportunity to see some of the operations of the yard, including 3 new service platforms, train cleaning facilities, a refuelling unit, a nighttime accommodation for up to 6 high-speed trains, and a new modular building with the capacity to accommodate up to 250 support staff. The Minister said, "I was delighted to see firsthand ScotRail's new engineering depot at Cadda and to hear about the benefits it will create for Scotland's railway going forward. This Scottish Government-funded facility will help support some of the existing fleet and also the introduction of new rolling stock as part of our decarbonisation action plan. It's already created 25 new jobs and also supports over 200 existing roles within the yard, which is another example of the real benefits for the industry and direct investment making a real difference from this government." An article written by Esther Tarnay. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 16th of May. Vapes being used by young girls in Glasgow to suppress hunger. An exclusive article written by Caroline Wilson, senior reporter. Vapes are being used by young girls as an appetite suppressant, prompting concern from Scottish public health experts. Staff involved in a new children's health service in Glasgow said girls were using the nicotine replacement products to curb hunger pangs, as reported by our sister title, The Herald. Julie Gordon of Glasgow City Youth Health Service said there'd been a significant rise in the number of young people aged 12 to 18 receiving help for eating disorders during the pandemic. A breakdown in support and increased isolation is thought to have contributed to the increase. Ms Gordon said the use of e-cigarettes by girls was of concern, as very little is known about the risk of vaping on young lungs. Vape shops and online stores in the UK are prohibited from selling the products to anyone under the age of 18, but there's growing concern the flavoured products are reaching children as young as primary age. Glasgow City Council said a number of retailers had been issued with warnings about illegal sales, and teams were regularly removing illegal and non-compliant disposable vaping products. Sheila Duffy, Chief Executive of ASH Scotland, said their use by young girls as an appetite suppressant was alarming on a number of levels and called for tighter advertising controls. Emma Broadhurt, Scotland officer for the eating disorder charity Beat, said, "I know from previous roles in health improvement that teenage girls used to smoke to suppress appetite, so this doesn't surprise me." Figures show the use of e-cigarettes among 11 to 18-year-olds in the UK has risen from 2.4% in 2015 to 4.1% in 2021. Public health expert Professor Linda Bald was involved in research which suggested e-cigarettes can be useful for adults who have stopped smoking as a means to avoid weight gain. In addition to the direct effects of nicotine, which affects the brain and metabolism, this was said to be due to factors including taste perception and sensation and behavioural replacement. She said e-cigarettes were a valuable tool in helping adult smokers quit, but said their use by young girls was concerning. "We certainly need to be vigilant in relation to this," she said. "It's obviously very concerning if it's linked to eating disorders. What we found in our study was that these were smokers, which is a different group, who had switched to vaping. Instead of a pudding, they might have a flavoured vape. The bottom line would be that we need to keep these products away from young people. There's certainly evidence that young people are using them, and these are not products for non-smokers or children. That's why we have an age of sale, but young people manage to get around that in the same way they do for cigarettes. We need to ensure that we enforce the policies that we have now. Schools need to be aware of it, and retailers need to make sure they're not getting into the hands of children." She said there was a bit of a moral panic around vaping amongst young people, which had not been helped by a series of deaths in the United States linked to contaminated cannabis oil. However, she said there was no evidence yet what the long-term health risks might be. "We know that vaping will have far less of an impact on health outcomes than smoking, but what we don't have is a cohort of people who have never vaped, who have been followed up over time." Sheila Duffy, Chief Executive of ASH Scotland, said the placement of vaping products next to sweets had been linked to increased use by children. She said, "It's alarming on a number of levels to hear about young girls using vaping products to suppress their appetites. These products are age-restricted for a good reason, as they can be highly addictive, and many include toxic chemicals that have not been safety tested and could damage health over time. This is especially a danger for children and young people as their lungs are still growing. Ash Scotland is concerned about young people perceiving vaping products to be safe due to promotions often being located close to sweets in retail outlets and research suggesting this visibility is associated with e-cigarettes experimentation by children and youths. Promoting novel products is a way in which the tobacco industry is seeking to reach future generations of potential consumers. It's vital the advertising and promotion of recreational tobacco-related products like these, which often have flavours, colouring and packaging attractive to young people, is curbed to reduce experimentation and protect long-term health. An article written by Caroline Wilson.
Evening Times, May 16. Lifestyle Memories. Remembering George Ritchie, who grew tomatoes in the St Enoch Centre. Report by Anne Fotheringham. He was the first person to take the helm of Glasgow's exciting new shopping centre. But who was George Ritchie? He was the first manager of Glasgow's St Enoch Centre, the giant glass-roofed shopping mall, which caused a sensation when it opened in 1989. It was the biggest glass structure in Europe and was like nothing else shoppers had seen in the city. In an interview with the Glasgow Times around a year before he died, George said he got so fed up with all the jokes about the centre being like a greenhouse, he decided to grow his own tomatoes. Very successful they were too, he said. Retail was in George's blood. His father was the manager of Trerons, one of Glasgow's oldest department stores. George planned to join the army following his national service, but he met a young woman called Carmen, which changed his life. The couple were married in 1965 and had 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. After completing an apprenticeship at cabinet makers Wiley and Lochhead in Buchanan Street, George moved to London to work for luxury department store Harrods. He told the Glasgow Times, "That was an experience. The boss used to walk about in the shop floor in his bowler hat." After spells in other shopping centres, including Trerons, where he took over as managing director in 1975, remaining until the company merged with R.W. Forsyth in 1983, George got the job of general manager for the city's new St Enoch Centre. The official opening ceremony took place in March 1990, with then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher doing the honours. George retired from the St Enoch in 1999 and received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. He was heavily involved with the Retail Trust. George sadly died in April 2020. Report by Anne Fotheringham.
From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 17th of May 2022, from the news section. Paisley taxman jailed after using dead man's identity in £170,000 VAT fraud, by Rebecca Newlands. A taxman who worked in Paisley has been jailed for his role in a fraud which saw more than £100,000 in public money paid out in false VAT repayment claims. Ex-VAT Inspector James McGee was making bogus repayment claims while using the identity of a dead man to cover up his fraud, HM Revenue and Customs said. The 66-year-old was jailed for 30 months at Ayr Sheriff Court on Monday after being found guilty of 2 counts of money laundering and 1 count of fraud. In total, £101,443.14 was paid out due to the false VAT repayment claims, while a further £70,351 was withheld by HMRC. McGee worked with Mark Dryden, 37, of Glasgow, Gary Prentice, 36, also of the city, and Carly McGinley, 33, of Clydebank. They were sentenced earlier this year for their part in the fraud. Laura Buchan, Procurator Fiscal for Specialist Casework, said the associates used their knowledge of the system to steal significant sums and then tried to cover their tracks by laundering the money. Upon his arrest in 2013, McGee was found to have 2 bank cards in the name of a dead man. One of the accounts had been opened after the man died, and the other had been credited with some of the fraudulently obtained money. McGee, of Troon in Ayrshire, who left his compliance role with HMRC in 2009, had handwritten papers at his house which contained detailed information on several VAT-registered businesses. It was then confirmed by experts that the records matched McGee's entries in his old HMRC diaries and notebooks. According to HMRC, McGee insisted he was not responsible for any criminality, but he did admit to using the hijacked identity when calling its VAT helpline. He said the person whose identity he used was the real controlling mind behind the criminal scheme, but in reality he was central to the fraud. McGee was sentenced to 24 months in jail for VAT fraud and handed a 30-month term for the 2 money laundering offences. He will serve these sentences at the same time. Dryden admitted to being concerned in an arrangement of criminal property in October last year, and he was sentenced to 10 months in jail in February. Prentice, meanwhile, pleaded guilty to being involved in serious and organised crime and being concerned in an arrangement of criminal property. At Ayr Sheriff Court in February, he was sentenced to 300 hours of unpaid work to be completed within 24 months. He was also made subject to a restriction of liberty order between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. for 4 months. And McGinley admitted to being involved in serious organised crime in November. She was fined £1,120 at the same court in February. Lindsay Thompson, operational lead for HMRC's Fraud Investigation Service, said McGee used his knowledge of the VAT system to coordinate a scheme to steal from the public purse money that is essential to fund the services we need, such as hospitals and schools. This was a shameful way for a former employee of 34 years to act, but this conviction shows that nobody is above the law. This article was by Rebecca Newlands. From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 17th of May 2022, from the news section. SNP and Greens strike deal to run Glasgow City Council, by Kathleen Nutt. The SNP and the Scottish Greens have struck a landmark deal to work together to run Glasgow City Council, the Herald can reveal. It is the first time the 2 parties will cooperate formally in local government in Scotland, and comes less than a year after they signed the Bute House Agreement at a national level. Green councillors will chair a new Net Zero and Climate Progress Monitoring Committee, while both parties will work together on developing a joint strategic plan for Glasgow City Council, which they expect to complete this autumn or winter. But the SNP will continue to run the council as a minority administration, a statement from the party added. The new administration will be formally proposed on Thursday at a full council meeting, where committee conveners will also be appointed. SNP group leader Susan Aitken said, Glaswegians face huge challenges in the years ahead, from the daily impact of the cost of living crisis on incomes and the longer-term effect of the pandemic and Brexit on communities, through to ensuring a fair and just transition delivers for all Glaswegians and that our city is climate ready. In a time of great uncertainty, this agreement between the SNP and Greens can help provide the confident and responsible leadership this city and its people require. This is about doing politics and governance differently. It's clear that the SNP and Greens have much common ground and have agreed in recent years on how best to meet major challenges affecting Glaswegians. And crucially, we share a willingness to collaborate to take the bold, urgent and progressive action which the immediate and future needs of Glaswegians demands. In a statement, the SNP said the agreement commits to constructive cooperation to deliver on shared and progressive priorities and aims to provide both the freshness of approach and surety of purpose required to help address the impact of the cost of living crisis, facilitate the city's recovery from the pandemic, and accelerate climate action. The SNP and Green groups of the City Council have worked closely on a number of key areas in recent years, most notably on joint budgets. They will vote to support the formation of a minority SNP council administration on Thursday. Both groups will continue to exist and meet as distinctive and separate parties with their own internal procedures and appointments, and the agreement is not binding on any votes beyond the first council meeting. The SNP statement added that in the weeks and months ahead, the two groups will work together constructively to agree a strategic plan for the council term 2022 to 2027. The strategic plan will include aligned SNP and Green manifesto commitments, as well as additional commitments from each group. It is expected that the strategic plan will be finalised and agreed by full council in autumn-winter 2022. Negotiations began in the City Chambers last week with Susan Aitken, Glasgow City Council's SNP group leader, and senior SNP councillor Ricky Bell in charge of negotiations for their party. The May the 5th poll saw the SNP re-elected as the largest party in Glasgow, winning 37 seats, 2 down on 2017, with Labour taking 36, up 5, and the Greens 10, up 3, and the Tories 2, down 6. Speaking to our sister title The Herald last week, Councillor Bell said a number of arrangements could be on the table, including a full coalition, a Holyrood-style cooperation-style agreement where some policy issues are excluded as areas of difference between the parties, or a confidence and supply deal where the Greens could agree to support the SNP on the budget and on confidence motions. Councillor John Molyneux, the co-leader of the Glasgow City Council Scottish Greens, who won the most first preference votes in the city's Pollock Shields ward, said last week he was open to any conversations to see how the party could deliver its manifesto. We believe the party that elected the largest number of councillors has the right to have first go and form an administration, he said. So we will proceed on that basis with our SNP colleagues first. If we are unable to make progress in those conversations, we are not ruling out talking to other parties. We respect the result of the election. But the result of the election is that people do want change, and I think that means there does need to be a change in approach. The SNP vote share was down and their seats are down, and obviously our vote share and seats are up. The cooperation deal between the SNP and the Greens in Glasgow will have to be agreed by Greens party members nationally. Scottish Green members backed the Bute House agreement last August, which saw co-leaders Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater appointed junior ministers in Nicola Sturgeon's government. It was the first time the party gained a position in government anywhere in the UK. The Bute House agreement stopped short of a formal coalition, as it allowed the parties to agree to disagree on certain policy areas, for instance, whether an independent Scotland should be a NATO member. The SNP support membership, while the Greens do not. After the local elections on May the 5th, First Minister and SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon said she would be open to her party forming Holyrood-style deals on councils with the Scottish Greens, but added that any such arrangements would be left up to parties locally. When asked about such agreements by the PA news agency, the First Minister said, "That's for local council groups to determine what's in the best interests of the areas they serve. But I'm in a partnership agreement in government in Holyrood with the Greens, so clearly I'd be very open to seeing that replicated in council areas in Scotland. But I think it's important that these decisions are driven locally and that we see parties that are prepared to recognise where they disagree but focus more on where they agree and come together to try to put arrangements in place that are in the best interests of the areas they serve." That article was by Kathleen Nutt.
From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022, from the news section. Coatbridge pensioner found after extremely out of character disappearance. by Rebecca Newlands. A Coatbridge pensioner has been found after his extremely out-of-character disappearance. Ronald Chisholm, 74, was last seen driving his Kia Venga along the M77 near Silverburn at around 3:45 p.m. on Tuesday. Officers grew concerned as a search was launched due to Mr. Chisholm's unusual behaviour. Inspector Lindsay McFarlane from Coatbridge Police Station had said, "It is extremely out of character for Ronald to be gone for this long, and concerns for his well-being are growing as time passes." Police Scotland have now informed the public that Mr. Chisholm was traced safe and well and thanked him for their assistance. And that story was by Rebecca Newlands. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022. From the news section, 5 injured after fire at block of flats on Glasgow's Great Western Road. By Rebecca Newlands. 5 people have been injured after a fire in a block of flats in Glasgow. Emergency crews rushed to the flats on Great Western Road, near Keele Avenue, just after 9 p.m. last night. 4 engines and a height vehicle put out the fire, which was on the 13th floor of the building. Casualties were taken into the care of ambulance staff. A Scottish Fire and Rescue Service spokesperson said, "We were alerted at 9:12 p.m. on Tuesday, May 17, to reports of a fire within a multi-storey block of flats on Great Western Road, Glasgow. Operations Control mobilised 4 appliances and a height vehicle to the scene, where crews worked to extinguish a fire affecting the 13th floor. 5 casualties were handed into the care of the Scottish Ambulance Service. Firefighters left after making the area safe." And that was a report by Rebecca Newlands. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022, from the news section, Glasgow's George Square prepped for Rangers celebrations as benches removed, by Lauren Brownlee, senior reporter. Glasgow's George Square has been prepared for potential celebrations ahead of significant Rangers matches this week. The club play Eintracht Frankfurt in the Europa League final tonight in Seville, before going up against Hearts in the Scottish Cup final at Hampden Park on Saturday afternoon. Thousands are expected to head to the city streets if Rangers are successful. Today, Glasgow City Council employees were seen erecting fences around statues and flower beds. Memorial benches, dedicated to beloved Glaswegians, have already been removed. The council say this has been done following a request from the club. Large piles of metal fencing were seen on the ground, and fences had also been put in place around a grass area. A spokesperson for the local authority said, "We have been in regular contact with Rangers in the build-up to this week's finals. Appropriate plans are being put in place to minimise the impact of any gatherings linked to these games." In May last year, memorial benches were damaged by supporters after thousands took over George Square to celebrate the club's first Premiership win in 10 years. Rangers fans raised cash to pay the £11,000 bill, originally footed by the council. In July last year, Police Scotland revealed more than 50 arrests had been made after some fans engaged in disorder. And that was a report by Lauren Brownlee. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022, from the news section, the beautiful South Side, Glasgow pub has fantastic night thanks to Paul Heaton. This article is an exclusive by Rebecca Newlands. A Glasgow pub told of their fantastic night after singer Paul Heaton put a generous tab on for his 60th birthday. Punters partied the night away and raised a glass on Monday, May the 9th, in honour of the beautiful South singer, who paid for rounds at 60 establishments across the UK. Manager Grant Montgomery said, "We had a fantastic night. It was really lovely seeing people coming together. It was such a special thing and such a generous thing to do for his birthday. It's quite a charitable thing that I've seen happen before. It's really cool. All of our patrons were up dancing and it was a real community. It was like a village getting together for a wee ceilidh. Our bar already has that vibe, but it was like that with bells on." The bar was contacted by Paul's PA, who asked if they would be interested in taking part in his generous idea, and Grant was more than up for it. "We were like 100% let's make it happen." Grant says that he can understand why the old toll bar was chosen. The pub has featured in various music and film projects over the years, including the 2013 film Filth, starring Drumchapel's James McAvoy. Grant said, "We have had a lot of different artists here over the years. Simple Minds have worked behind the bar, so I guess it's a music-orientated bar. The bar is 147 years old, and I think generation after generation, music has been a big part of it. Also, Glasgow as a city is an epicentre of culture when it comes to music. We really feel it and embrace it. The Beautiful South have played in Glasgow many times. Paul might have played across the bridge and came over here, or maybe a house hotel was close by. But this place has so many tables I can imagine it was sentimental. On the night, the old toll doubled its average Monday crowd with waves of people coming in all day and saying, 'Hello, we're here for a pint on Paul.' Grant and the team were delighted to see punters raise a glass in unity after such a difficult couple of years. Grant said, 'It was good for those who had not yet breached their four walls after the lockdown and became comfortable at home. But they became on behalf of Paul being told someone they loved as a musician, and I think that gesture made them cross that line that was their doorstep and step into a social environment. I think all of us want that and fear if was taken away from that pint we poured or cocktail we shook to make that happen.' Paul said, 'I just want to bring people together,' and that's what he did, and he made it happen in a wee classic Victorian pub. He made it the beautiful South Side." And that article was an exclusive by Rebecca Newlands. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022, from the news section, exclusive. Strikes loom as 800 ScotRail services are cancelled in a week and driver work to rule. By Martin Williams. A summer national rail strike is moving closer, as up to 800 ScotRail services were cancelled in just over a week in the wake of a driver's pay dispute, which has seen workers unofficially work to rule. Unions remain in deadlock over a series of disputes, one involving thousands of Network Rail workers, which could bring services in Scotland to a standstill this summer. There are at least 2 strike ballots planned for industrial action involving drivers and other rail workers, with newly nationalised ScotRail, reports her sister title The Herald. The Transport Staff Union, TSSA, has now called for action to avoid a far-reaching industrial dispute across our railways this summer, as it considers a potential national strike ballot, with its staff working for Network Rail, which owns the rail infrastructure, including tracks and signals. The National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport, RMT, has already begun a ballot for strike action, which it is feared will bring Scottish rail services to a standstill, as safety concerns surface over plans to cut hundreds of critical maintenance jobs. The unions say Network Rail is planning to cut at least 2,500 safety critical maintenance jobs as part of a £2 billion reduction in spending, including hundreds north of the border. Meanwhile, workers have been subject to pay freezes and changes to their terms and conditions. The TSSA union is now in the process of consulting reps over an industrial action ballot amongst its Network Rail members across the UK, including Scotland. TSSA General Secretary Manuel Cortes said many of their members had not seen a price increase in 2 years, and with prices rocketing, enough is enough. He said, "If Network Rail don't come forward very soon with proposed pay increases, which at least match inflation, a summer of discontent is on the way across our railways." It comes as unions raise concerns over the worst cuts to rail services since the dark days of Beeching, fearing plans by the newly nationalised ScotRail to cut 30% of services for several months. The train drivers' union, ASLEF, said if service cuts were implemented, it would represent the biggest cut to Scotland's rail services since the Beeching cuts of the 1960s. RMT workers has joined ASLEF in looking to balance ScotRail members on whether they should take industrial action this summer over paying conditions. ScotRail has urged trade unions to remain at the negotiating table so they can reach an agreement that delivers for staff, customers and the taxpayer. They warned that industrial action risks putting people off travelling by trains at a time when we need to do everything we can to get customers back onto the railway and revenue in the door. It confirmed that it was looking at how it can deliver greater timetable certainty and reliability for customers, and will say more in the coming days. The minister-controlled train operator has blamed a significant number of pay dispute train drivers, as an estimated 800 services have been cancelled since May the 8th, with around 100 more acts yesterday, Tuesday. Over 300 other services are estimated to have had train carriages cut, so they carried less people because of the driver shortage. Union sources have confirmed that individual drivers have chosen to work their contracted hours only during the pay dispute, as its strike ballot is planned, meaning ScotRail cannot meet the demand. As I've said, the ScotRail system has always been understaffed, meaning it is relying on drivers working out of hours, including Sundays, as the service runs on a 6-day week basis, not 7. The latest spate of cancellations, a week after ScotRail launched a half-price rail fare offer to try and entice people back onto trains in the wake of the COVID pandemic restrictions being lifted. A separate RMT pay dispute meant there were no TransPennine Express operating in the Anglo-Scottish West Coast Main Line on Sunday, with more Sunday strikes over the next 3 weekends. The RMT in both their Network Rail and ScotRail disputes are wanting a higher wage rise than the 2.2% on offer, and a ban on compulsory redundancies for between 2 and 5 years. It also wants no booking office or station closures for 2 years, and the recruitment of hundreds of new apprentices. Mick Hogg, RMT Scotland organiser, described the ScotRail cuts plan as an absolute shambles and warned that with the various strike ballots on the table, it was safe to say industrial carnage is days away. He said, "We've been kicked in the teeth as far as the RMT is concerned. It's not good enough. If the government and ScotRail can raise fares by 3.8% and give nurses a 4% wage increase for being key essential workers, then where does that sit with rail workers, who have also been called key and essential workers and are being offered a 2.2% increase?" The RMT ScotRail industrial action could start on July the 11th at the earliest, with the Edinburgh Festival starting in the first week of August. The Scottish Government decided last year to take ScotRail under direct state control, stripping a belly of the franchise 3 years early, in the wake of a continuing outcry over service failings and rising costs to the taxpayer. It came after a 2018 winter timetable with the introduction of high-speed trains and new Class 385 electric trains, ushered in months of cancellations and disruption to services, with much of it put down to staff shortages, partly due to training and to deal with new trains and timetables. The Scottish Government is now in charge of the rail operator, which runs around 2,400 train services each day through an arm's-length company, ScotRail Trains Limited. A Transport Scotland spokesperson said, "Rail unions have long campaigned for public ownership, and this Scottish Government has delivered our railways back into the public sector control. Rail unions are aware any additional increase above the public pay sector policy amount have a clear process which must be followed, which includes cabinet approval. Non-driving staff have already reached the previously negotiated and agreed 2.2% increase for this year, while negotiations continue with both ASLEF and the RMT. We would encourage everyone to continue the meaningful dialogue with ScotRail, their employer, so a mutually agreeable outcome can be reached as soon as possible. It is our intention for ScotRail and its staff to benefit from the transition to public sector control, and that is why we would call on everyone involved to take time to consider all options carefully. ScotRail is looking at how best to manage this, including looking at revising timetables on a temporary basis. Our experience is that people want certainty when they travel, so we are looking at how best to provide as much as that as we can during this challenging period." David Simpson, ScotRail Service Delivery Director, said, "We are experiencing a driver shortage, which means some services will be cancelled. We are very sorry for the disruption and inconvenience this will cause, and understand the customer frustration when this happens. Unfortunately, since the drivers' union ASLEF announced it would ballot for strike action, a significant number of drivers, but not all, have declined to make themselves available for overtime or rest day working. While rest day working is entirely voluntary, this does mean we do not have the number of drivers available to operate the full timetable. We are currently reliant on drivers working overtime or on their rest days because of delays into training new drivers caused by the pandemic. This is something experienced by all operators across Britain. It's said that the 2.2% pay offer comes with a top-up revenue sharing arrangement that could potentially deliver an overall pay package worth a 7% increase. This would apply where revenue targets are exceeded. ScotRail has made a good offer that could potentially deliver an overall pay package worth a 7% increase to staff. This gives hardworking staff a well-deserved pay rise, recognises the cost of living challenges faced by families across the country, and delivers value for the taxpayer, said Mr Simpson. And that article was an exclusive by Martin Williams. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022, from the news section, warrant issued for man accused of throwing cup at Ballymackay at Central Park. By Connor Gordon, court reporter. A warrant has been issued for a man accused of assaulting a footballer. Zach Griffiths is charged with throwing a cup at Hearts player Ballymackay during a match between the Edinburgh side and Celtic at Parkhead last December the 2nd. Griffiths entered no plea when the case initially called at Glasgow Sheriff Court on May the 6th. The 24-year-old of Aberdeen was due to be in the dock for a further hearing last week. Court officials today confirmed a warrant was granted for the arrest of Griffiths after he failed to show. Griffiths faced an alternative charge to the assault of instead behaving in a threatening and abusive manner during the game. And that article is by Connor Gordon.
Evening Times, May 18. Opinion. Susan Aiken says, democracy is the greatest tool we have for change. First of all, I would like to offer my thanks to everyone who voted in the recent local elections. Democracy is the greatest tool we have for change and for positive impact on our lives and communities, our city, and indeed our world. Local government may not get the attention of the Scottish or UK parliaments, yet it delivers many of those vital frontline services and policies which are closest to our everyday lives and we cherish most. From education and ensuring children and young people have the best starts in life, through to attracting jobs and investment, responding to the climate emergency, cleansing, and ensuring citizens have access to world-class parks and green spaces, councils have huge responsibilities. It is crucial, therefore, that as many of our citizens as possible are engaged with the local democratic process and have their say. All of us who are involved in politics have a duty to promote that. Of course, I would like to thank all those Glaswegians who gave their vote to the SNP. You returned us again as the largest party in the city, and after the unprecedented challenges of the last couple of years, have placed your trust in us. Each of the 37 SNP councillors elected appreciates the responsibilities placed upon them as representatives of their communities and of this great city. In recent days, the SNP and Scottish Greens represented on the City Council have held a series of very positive and mature discussions about what is best for Glasgow and its citizens. Those discussions have concluded with us reaching a working agreement to enable the formation of a new council administration. The SNP Green Agreement commits both our groups to cooperating to make sure we do all we can to deliver on our shared and progressive priorities, bringing a freshness of approach and purpose to local politics in Glasgow. We must not underestimate the huge challenges Glaswegians face in the years ahead, from the daily impact of the cost of living crisis on incomes and the longer-term effect of the pandemic on communities, through to ensuring a fair and just transition delivers for all Glaswegians, and that our city is climate ready. This is a massive 5 years for the future of our city and the well-being of its people. It is clear that the SNP and Greens have much common ground and have agreed on much in recent years on how best to meet the major challenges affecting Glaswegians. Our joint budget in February, for example, was the only one with genuinely committed action to address the cost of living crisis, which delivered a costed plan to enable Glasgow to properly recover from the pandemic, including the look and feel of our city, and which invested £1 million in each of our communities. In this time of great uncertainty, we share a willingness to collaborate to take the bold, urgent and progressive action that the immediate and future needs of Glaswegians demands. As part of the agreement, the SNP and Greens will tomorrow vote to support the formation of a minority SNP council administration. Green councillors will take up a number of key positions, including the chair of a new Net Zero and Climate Progress Monitoring Committee. It is, however, vital to stress that both groups will continue to exist and meet as distinct and separate parties, with their own internal procedures and appointments. In the weeks and months ahead, a priority for the two groups will be to work together constructively to agree the 5-year plan for the Council to take us up to 2027. The strategic plan will bring together much from SNP and Green manifestos, as well as additional commitments from each group, and we hope to have this finalised and agreed by the end of the year. This agreement is about doing politics and governance differently, but the outcome remains the same: a fairer, greener, more prosperous and more inclusive Glasgow. Planning for the recovery of the city centre is underway. Glasgow city centre is a national asset, home to around 170,000 jobs. It is an internationally renowned location for business, retail, culture, hospitality and learning. A symbol of the changed city Glasgow has become in recent decades, it has helped define who and what we are as Glaswegians. But like our peers across the world, the consequences of the massive growth of online retail and changing consumer habits have severely impacted parts of the city centre. Added to this, the look and feel of the city centre has suffered tremendously during the pandemic. Much of the planning for the long-term recovery of the city centre is already underway. It is hugely significant that two major developers are working towards what will amount to billions of pounds in investment, transforming the area at the top of Buchanan Street and Argyle Street. This is a huge vote of confidence in Glasgow and our plans for the city centre. And the revamp of George Square, the continuation of the Avenues projects, and the rebuild of the Glasgow School of Art will all be crucial in the emergence of a different but world-class city centre in the years ahead. But no one can deny there are interventions we need now. This is why SNP colleagues and I made the case to the Scottish Government for assistance to support short to medium-term recovery. The £2 million cash awarded in recent months will contribute to a raft of practical measures to revitalise the city centre, including expanding cafe culture, marketing campaigns, addressing the blight caused by vacant shop units, and contributing to a deep clean of streets and public spaces. Over the next few weeks, those short-term recovery measures will take fuller shape and be made public. A dedicated team of officers is already working on how we address issues such as the state of vacant premises on the city centre experience. But we are looking at the rollout of new deep clean teams and new bins which can compress litter and create more capacity. It will involve engaging with the owners of vacant units to see what more they can do to improve the look of their properties, particularly around graffiti. And it will involve working with other public agencies, including the police, to address concerns about antisocial behaviour generated by young people, particularly around Royal Exchange Square. Glasgow is very much emerging from one of the most traumatic episodes of its modern history. We want our citizens, businesses and visitors to see that recovery take shape on our streets. In the months ahead, we will take positive and significant steps forward to achieving that, says Susan Aiken.
And that was this week's Glasgow Times News Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.